The ballroom smelled of roses and polished wood, a scent I hadn't consciously remembered, but instantly recognized from every family gathering I had avoided for years. I hovered near the edge of the crowd, cup of sparkling water in hand, watching the room swirl with well-dressed relatives, laughter, and champagne bubbles that caught the light like small, ephemeral stars. 7 years. 7 years of not asking, not pleading, not showing up. And yet, here I was, because my sister's wedding was impossible to ignore. I had arrived early, partly to avoid awkward encounters and partly to observe. Observation had become my habit, the way a person learns the shape of a room, the subtle cues in body language, the patterns of interaction that reveal what people value. My parents had always been adept at sending messages without saying a word. I remembered one morning in particular, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my tuition bill, while my sister's application was signed, stamped, and fully funded. Be independent, my father had said, his voice flat, a curious mixture of expectation and dismissal. My mother hadn't added a word, merely smiled at my sister as she left for her college tour. I had packed my own bag that night, my anger carefully folded inside along with resignation. That anger had never vanished, it had evolved, grown quieter, shaped into the resolve that brought me here today. Watching the guests arrive, I noticed the small details, the way my sister adjusted her veil with trembling hands, the way her fiancé laughed a little too loudly at someone's joke. I remembered my own first apartment, first job, first paycheck, all self-earned, small triumphs that were invisible to the very people who had refused to see my worth. I had learned to thrive in silence, to let my life speak when words fell flat. My parents finally noticed me. Not with warmth, not with genuine curiosity, but with the subtle dissonance that comes when someone has been excluded and yet remains present. My mother's eyes flicked to mine, and for a fraction of a second, a question hovered there unspoken. My father's jaw tightened as though he were trying to remember a name or a reason, but it was me, unmistakably me. "You've changed," my mother said eventually, her voice soft, uncertain, the kind of voice that only surfaces when control wavers. I didn't answer immediately. My sister was bustling past, her dress whispering against the marble floor, leaving a trail of perfume and expectations. I had learned long ago that words could carry weight, and sometimes silence carried more. I let them squirm a little under it. The ceremony began. I watched my sister walk down the aisle, shoulders squared, face radiant, completely unaware of the internal battle I had carried for years. My mind wandered, not in envy but in reflection. There had been anger, yes, plenty of it. And there had been grief, a quiet grief that no one acknowledged because it didn't come wrapped in drama. But there had also been freedom. I had freedom now, unclaimed by parental expectation, uninsured by favoritism. Then the moment came. My parents, slightly flushed from social anxiety and champagne, leaned toward each other as the officiant asked the usual ceremonial questions. My father glanced at me, hesitated, and finally spoke. "Why does it feel like something's missing?" Silence. The question wasn't for me, it wasn't meant to acknowledge my existence in a kind or loving way. But it hung in the air, heavy and dangerous, exposing the subtle imbalance they had always tried to ignore. My sister's fiancé turned pale, his hand tightening around the edge of the podium. "Shut up," he yelled, voice cracking. "This person is—" He stopped, mid-word, caught between social expectation and instinct. I felt no thrill, no satisfaction. Just the quiet shift in the room, a subtle acknowledgement of presence and consequence. Everyone else froze, the buzz of chatter and clinking glasses suspended like a held breath. For the first time in years, the dynamics I had absorbed as a child, the unspoken hierarchy, the invisible power, were unsettled, and not by my doing. Authority had intervened externally, in the form of someone else's protective outrage, not mine. The wedding proceeded. I smiled faintly when my sister passed me on the way to the reception hall, a glance that carried confusion and curiosity. My parents avoided my eyes for a stretch longer than was comfortable, and yet I noticed they were watching me, registering my calm composure, the subtle dignity I carried simply by being there. The control they had once wielded through funding and favoritism had shifted, quiet but undeniable. Later, I found myself standing alone near the terrace, watching lights reflect off the water. I thought about the years I had spent proving myself in silent ways, about the quiet victories of self-reliance, resilience, and emotional endurance. There was no crowning moment of revenge, no dramatic confrontation, only the understated authority of a life lived on my terms. The silence around me was full of meaning, the kind that cannot be manufactured in a single moment of spectacle. I thought about my sister. I thought about my parents. And I realized I felt a strange mixture of relief and lingering sadness, a recognition that relationships are messy, that favoritism leaves its scars, but that autonomy can be its own form of validation. It was a quiet victory, uncelebrated, unannounced, but fully mine. The reception continued, laughter and music blending into the evening air, but I felt distant from the spectacle, content in a small, private acknowledgement of self-worth. Power had shifted subtly, tension had surfaced and receded, and I had borne witness without needing to dominate. Emotional estrangement remained, a shadow stretching across familiar faces, but it no longer dictated my sense of self. And so I stayed for a while, holding my cup loosely, smiling faintly at old acquaintances, letting the moments pass. The world continued, the wedding ended, and life, with its imperfections and quiet triumphs, moved forward. I had no need for celebration, no need to assert, only the calm knowledge that my presence carried weight. My parents' question, the fiancé's outburst, the subtle acknowledgement of a shift, they were all pieces of a larger pattern I had long ago anticipated. I left before the night fully ended, slipping out into the cool air, taking a deep breath. The lights of the city reflected in the water below, the distant sound of music trailing behind me. I felt both estranged and complete, both hurt and resilient. And I carried with me the quiet authority of a life built on self-reliance, a dignity unclaimed by others, and a subtle, undeniable victory that required no applause.